Have you ever, I don't know, come across some idea that just kind of messes with your head a little bit? Like it seems totally backwards, but then when you think about it, it's actually super important.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like one of those things where your gut reaction is like, no way, that can't be right.
Exactly. That's what we like to dive into here on the deep dive, those brain twisting ideas. And
Uh-huh.
today, we've got a real doozy, the Jevons paradox.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. It's this weird thing in economics where making something more efficient, like using less energy or whatever, can actually lead to us using more of it overall.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive for sure.
Totally. So we're going to dig into that today, see what's going on there. And it's connected to some really important stuff like how we try to save energy and even things like the future of AI.
Definitely. It touches on a lot of big picture ideas. So we've got a ton of research here to go through, like articles on the history of this Jevons paradox thing, the economic forces behind it, and why it still matters today.
Tons of.
Yeah, and we really want to break it down and understand what this paradox is all about. Like, why does it happen? And why should anyone care? Especially when we're talking about making things more efficient.
Yeah, it's not just some abstract theory. So where did this mind-bending idea even come from?
Well, we got to rewind the clock a bit, back to 1865. There was this British economist named William Stanley Jevons. He was a pretty sharp guy.
Obviously, if there's a paradox named after him.
Right. So Jevons wrote this book called The Coal Question.
Hmm.
And in it, he made this, well, really unexpected observation about how Britain was using coal during the Industrial Revolution.
Okay, coal, Industrial Revolution. That's setting the stage.
Yeah. Picture it. 19th century Britain. Everything's running on coal factories, trains, the whole shebang. But there was a big worry that they were going to run out, like literally run out of coal.
Yeah, it was their main source of energy, right?
Exactly. So the obvious solution seemed to be, well, let's just get better at using it.
Hmm.
Make the engines more efficient, use less coal to power everything.
Makes total sense on the surface.
Right. Like less coal per unit of output, problem solved. That was the prevailing thought at the time. They thought tech improvements and efficiency would directly translate into using less coal overall.
Like a one-to-one thing.
Yeah. But Jevons, he saw something completely different happening. He was looking at the impact of new technologies, like James Watt's improved steam engine.
Yeah, steam engine.
Uh-huh.
Classic Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, and this engine, it was a total game changer in terms of efficiency, like way more power using way less coal compared to older engines.
So you'd think, okay, less coal needed, we're good.
Exactly. But what Jevons actually observed was, as these super efficient steam engines became more common, coal consumption didn't go down. It actually went up.
Wait, what? How does that even...
Right. It's wild. And Jevons, he was pretty blunt about it. He said, and I quote, "It is a confusion of ideas to suppose that the economical use of fuel is equivalent to diminished consumption. The very contrary is the truth."
So the better they got at using coal, the more they actually burn.
Yep, that's the Jevons paradox in a nutshell.
Okay, that's seriously messed up. Why would that happen? Like, what's the logic behind this crazy outcome?
Well, to understand it, we need to delve into some basic economics, specifically this thing called the law of demand.
Hit us with some Econ 101.
All right, so the basic idea is when the price of something drops, people tend to buy more of it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Sales and stuff.
Right. Now let's think about this in terms of resource efficiency. When we become more efficient with a resource, the cost of whatever that resource helps us do also goes down.
Okay, so give us a real-world example here, something everyone can relate to.
Let's stick with the fuel-efficient car example.
Yeah.
So you've got a car that can now go twice as far on a single tank of gas because of some new engine tech. What's effectively happened is the cost per mile of driving has been cut in half.
Right, so suddenly driving feels cheaper.
Exactly. That road trip you've been thinking about doesn't seem so expensive anymore. Or maybe commuting a bit further for a better job feels more doable.
I see where you're going with this. So even though the car itself might be more expensive up front, the actual act of driving becomes cheaper per mile.
Precisely. And because it's cheaper, people are more likely to drive more, either more frequently or longer distances. And this increase in driving, you can potentially wipe out the fuel savings from that efficient engine.
So they're using less gas per mile, but they're driving more miles overall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that increase in demand, the one that happens because the cost has gone down, that's what economists call the rebound effect.
Okay, rebound effect. Got it.
Now, the Jevons paradox comes into play when this rebound effect is greater than 100%.
Greater than 100%. What does that even mean?
It means that the demand increases so much that it not only cancels out the initial savings from the efficiency improvement, but actually leads to us using more of the resource overall.
Okay, so back to the cars. It's like people start driving so much more because it's cheaper that the total gas consumption actually ends up higher than it was before the cars became more efficient.
Precisely. It sounds crazy, but that's the paradox in action.
Wow. So it's not a simple equation of efficiency equals less consumption.
Not at all. There are other forces at play.
Now, you mentioned before an example where efficiency didn't lead to this paradox.
Yes. A good contrasting case is agriculture. Think about how much farming has changed over the last century. Like, the advancements in productivity have been insane.
We can grow so much more food on the same amount of land now.
Exactly. And that increased productivity has led to lower food prices. But here's the thing. We haven't seen a huge increase in how much food people actually eat.
Yeah, there's only so much you can eat.
Right, exactly. The demand for basic food is what we call inelastic, meaning it doesn't change much even when the price changes.
So instead of everyone suddenly eating twice as much food because it's cheaper, we saw something else happen.
Right. What we saw was a massive shift in the labor market. Basically, fewer people were needed to work in agriculture.
Okay, so the efficiency didn't increase consumption in that case. It changed the way we work.
Exactly. So the key takeaway here is that it's not just about the efficiency itself, but about how sensitive the demand for the good or service is to that change in price.
You're saying if the demand is really sensitive to price changes, what you called elastic earlier, then this Jevons paradox is more likely to happen.
Exactly. And the research lays out 3 conditions that really need to be in place for this paradox to take hold on a large scale.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are the 3 ingredients for this paradox recipe?
All right, so first, you absolutely need some kind of technological advancement or some change that increases the efficiency or productivity of a resource.
That's the starting point, right? Got to make things more efficient.
Exactly. But here's the catch. That efficiency improvement has to translate into a lower price for consumers.
So if the price doesn't actually go down, people aren't going to rush out to buy more.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. That's the second condition. And then the third, and this is super important, is that lower price needs to trigger a big increase in how much people want to buy. We need that high elasticity of demand.
So it's a chain reaction. Better tech makes things cheaper, which then makes people want to buy a lot more of it. And that's when the Jevons paradox comes into play.
Bingo. Now, while Jevons noticed this back in the 1800s, the idea kind of went under the radar for a while. But then in the 1980s, 2 economists, Daniel Khazzoom and Leonard Brooks, they brought it back into the spotlight. And they specifically looked at energy consumption.
So they basically took Jevons's idea about coal and applied it to energy in general.
Exactly. They argued that if you increase energy efficiency across an entire economy, it could actually lead to increased energy consumption overall.
Which seems completely backwards.
Right. But their argument, it became pretty influential, and it's known as the Khazzoom-Brookes postulate.
Okay, another catchy name for an economic theory, but how does it actually work? Like, why would making energy more efficient lead to using more of it?
So another economist, Harry Saunders, he built on their work and tied it to this thing called neoclassical growth theory.
Sounds complicated.
It can be, but the basic idea is this. When energy becomes more efficient, it gets cheaper, right? And this cheaper energy, it doesn't just encourage people to directly use more of it because their bills are lower, it actually impacts the whole economy.
Give me an example.
Sure, cheaper energy can lead to economic growth, increased productivity, and higher incomes for people.
Okay, I see. So the whole economic engine gets revved up because of cheaper energy.
Right, and this economic growth, it ends up driving up the total demand for energy across the board.
So even though individuals might be using a little less energy here and there, the overall demand goes up because the economy is booming.
Exactly. Saunders really highlighted the difference between what happens at a small scale, like in one specific market, and what happens at the level of the whole economy.
So it's like you might save some energy in one area thanks to efficiency, but then the overall effect on the economy could lead to more energy use overall. This is making me think about all those initiatives to combat climate change. Like, so many governments and environmental groups push for energy efficiency as a key solution.
It's definitely a major focus in environmental policy.
But if this Jevons paradox thing is real, then simply improving efficiency might not be enough.
Yeah, it raises some really important questions about the effectiveness of relying solely on energy efficiency to achieve sustainability.
So are you saying that all those efforts to make our homes more energy efficient or to develop more fuel efficient cars could actually backfire?
Well, it's not necessarily that simple. There are still benefits to efficiency.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom.
Right. For example, even if the Jevons paradox is happening, more efficient technology can often lead to higher productivity and a better quality of life, just like Jevons observed with the steam engine driving industrial progress.
Right, so there are other positive side effects.
Exactly. And in markets that are already well developed, the rebound effect might not be that big, meaning efficiency improvements do still lead to some reduction in resource use.
Okay, so it's not like every efficiency gain immediately leads to more consumption.
Not necessarily. Plus, improving efficiency can also make us less vulnerable to price spikes in things like energy markets.
Right, so it can help with stability.
Exactly.
But it sounds like the key takeaway here is that efficiency alone isn't a magic bullet.
You got it. The research suggests that to really get a handle on resource use, we probably need to combine efficiency with other policies that directly address how much we consume, or policies that maintain or even increase the cost of using resources.
So it's like if you make something more efficient, but you also make it more expensive to use, you can potentially counteract that tendency for demand to go through the roof.
Precisely. Some ecological economists have even suggested taking the money saved from efficiency gains, through taxes or something, and reinvesting it in restoring and protecting nature.
That's interesting. So instead of those savings just leading to more consumption, you channel them into something beneficial for the environment.
Exactly. It highlights the fact that tackling resource use is a complex challenge that requires a multi-pronged approach.
Now, we've talked a lot about historical examples, but the sources we looked at, they also mentioned some modern situations where the Jevons paradox might be at play.
Right. It's not just an old idea about coal. It's relevant today.
So give us some examples.
Well, take agriculture, for instance. We're getting really good at developing farming techniques that increase crop yields, which leads to lower food prices. But here's the thing. That could make it more profitable for farmers to use even more land to grow those now cheaper crops.
So even though we're growing more food per acre, we might end up using more acres overall.
It really depends on the specific crop and how producers and consumers respond to those changes in price.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about other examples?
Well, one of the most interesting areas where people are talking about the Jevons paradox is in artificial intelligence.
AI, huh? How does a theory about coal from the 1800s apply to something as futuristic as AI?
Well, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, he's actually talked about the Jevons paradox in relation to AI. The basic idea is that as AI becomes more efficient at doing things, like way faster, cheaper, and with fewer mistakes, the cost of those tasks goes down dramatically.
Okay, so if AI can do something much better and cheaper than a human, people are going to want to use it a lot more.
Exactly. And some economists believe this could lead to more jobs in certain fields, like radiology, translation, and coding.
Wait, more jobs? I thought AI was going to take away jobs.
That's the common assumption.
Yeah.
But the idea is that the cheaper and more efficient AI is, the more demand there will be for the services it provides. And this demand could create a need for more human workers, either working alongside AI or in new roles that emerge because of AI.
So it's not just about replacing humans. It's about AI creating new opportunities and changing the way work is done.
Exactly. And it all comes back to that Jevons paradox. More efficiency can sometimes lead to more overall activity, which can create a need for more resources, including human labor.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. It shows how this old idea is still relevant in understanding the impact of even the most cutting-edge technology.
For sure.
Okay, so to sum it all up, the Jevons paradox throws a wrench into the idea that making things more efficient automatically leads to using less stuff. Lower prices can drive up demand, and we might end up using even more resources overall.
A great summary.
And while efficiency is still important, it might not be enough on its own to solve our big environmental challenges. We need to think about combining it with policies that manage how much we consume and what it costs to use resources.
Right. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Absolutely. And as we see all these amazing technologies popping up, all promising to make things more efficient, it makes you wonder, how do we make sure those gains actually lead to a more sustainable future and not just more consumption?
That's the million-dollar question.
It definitely is. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Jevons paradox. It's been a wild ride.
Glad to be here.
And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this brain-bending exploration, make sure to follow, like, subscribe, and let us know what other deep dives you'd like us to take on. There's a whole world of fascinating ideas out there waiting to be explored.